In a darkened courtroom, the hum of whispers filled the air. The man sitting at the defendant's table was no longer the soldier he once was. Once proud, once strong, now bound by a wheelchair, his legs lifeless, but beneath the surface of his quiet exterior, there was a fire that hadn't been extinguished, the kind of fire that no amount of war, injury, or pain could ever fully take away. Today, as his day in court approached, he knew that he was fighting a battle that went far beyond his physical wounds. It was a fight for his dignity, his truth, and the loyalty of a partner who had been with him through every single moment of his darkest hours. David McAllister had once been the picture of strength, a decorated Army Ranger with an iron will and a heart that would never falter. But that was before the explosion, before the roadside bomb took everything from him. His ability to walk, his career, his sense of purpose. When the blast knocked him unconscious, he had no idea that the war had just shifted into a new, personal battle. Now, sitting in the cold, unyielding courtroom, David struggled to focus. His eyes, sharp but weary, scanned the room. It was supposed to be a place of justice, but it felt more like a reminder of his vulnerability. The whispers of spectators, the low murmur of the lawyers' arguments, the sound of fingers tapping on wood, all of it felt like a distant hum in the background, fading into the noise of his own mind. He wasn't here for himself, though. No. He was here for his dog, his partner in this fight, a German shepherd named Titan. Titan wasn't just a dog to David. He was family. They had been through hell and back together. On the battlefield, Titan had been his protector, his companion, his lifeline. And now, in a world that had moved on without him, Titan was still the only thing that reminded him that he still had a purpose. David adjusted the armrest on his wheelchair, glancing at Titan sitting quietly at his feet. Titan's large brown eyes never left David's face. There was a bond between them that words couldn't describe. It wasn't just trust, it was something deeper, a connection forged in the fires of war. "You're with me, aren't you?" David whispered under his breath, just loud enough for Titan to hear. Titan responded with a soft whine and nudged his hand with his nose. David's heart tightened. This dog had saved his life more times than he could count, but today Titan's loyalty was about to be tested in an entirely new way. This was it. The trial. The moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. David had been accused of something he didn't do. He had been accused of harming a civilian during his deployment, a crime that would have shattered his reputation beyond repair. But the truth was, he had never even fired his weapon that day. Titan had been with him, though, and if there was one thing David knew, it was that Titan had seen the truth. The courtroom was still buzzing with the energy of anticipation when the judge's gavel banged down. The trial had officially begun. David's heart pounded in his chest as the opposing counsel began questioning his every move on the battlefield. The defense had painted a picture of a war hero, a man whose noble actions were twisted into a narrative of guilt. But as the prosecutor spoke, David could feel Titan's calm presence beside him, like a tether to reality. It was in that moment that he realized, there was only one being who had witnessed the truth of that day, and he was sitting right next to him with an unwavering stare. Titan's presence in the courtroom was both a blessing and a curse. While his loyal eyes provided David with the grounding he needed, Titan's calmness also brought back memories of the battlefield. Titan had been there when David had narrowly avoided death, when they had crossed paths with insurgents, when they had fought side by side in the face of danger. Every memory was tied to Titan's unwavering loyalty. As the trial wore on, David's frustration grew. The prosecutor's words felt like daggers in his chest. "You claim to have done nothing, Mr. McAllister, but your story is inconsistent. Your dog was with you. Can he verify your innocence?" The question hung in the air like a thick cloud. David's hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. His mind was racing. How could he make them understand? How could he make them believe that Titan was the key to his innocence? The answer was simple, but it was terrifying. Titan could communicate, but not in the way humans expected. Titan's training had given him skills that few understood. David's heart pounded as he realized what he would have to do. Titan had always been more than a service dog. He had been trained to read situations, to understand commands that went beyond basic obedience. In combat, this skill had saved David's life on more than one occasion. But now, as the trial dragged on, David felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He couldn't keep up the facade of a soldier without his dog. He needed Titan to speak for him in the only way he knew how, through the secret signal they had shared ever since they first met. David's hand trembled as he subtly reached for the small metal ring hidden in his pocket. A tool that he and Titan had used for years, one that no one in the courtroom would understand. It was their silent language, forged in the heart of battle, a language that would either save him or destroy him. With one small gesture, David had to trust that Titan would know exactly what to do. David's mind was racing as he reached into his pocket. The courtroom had become suffocating. The whispers of the jury, the piercing questions from the prosecutor, everything was closing in. He needed to make a decision. He had practiced it countless times in the comfort of his home, with Titan lying beside him, waiting for the signal. Titan was more than just a dog, he was a partner in every sense of the word. And now, David had to trust that Titan would respond the way he always had, without hesitation. Without doubt. David subtly slipped the small metal ring from his pocket. His hand brushed against it for a brief moment, the coolness of the metal grounding him. It was the signal. It had always been the signal. In the past, the signal had meant different things. It had meant stay alert on patrol, come closer in the field, or take cover during a firefight. But today, in the sterile, lifeless space of the courtroom, the signal would mean something different. Today it would mean speak the truth. David felt the slightest shift in Titan's posture. The dog's muscles tensed ever so slightly, his eyes locking onto David's, as though he understood the gravity of the situation. Titan was waiting for the command. The air was thick with tension as the prosecutor launched into his final argument. "You say you didn't fire that shot, Mr. McAllister? But how do we know that for sure? You were the only one there with the civilian." David's breath hitched. This was it. His time to act. With a subtle tilt of his hand, David gave the signal. It was almost imperceptible, but Titan saw it. Titan's ears perked up, his eyes sharp and focused, like a lion on the hunt. Titan's response to the signal was instantaneous, but the result wasn't anything anyone could have predicted. The courtroom fell silent in shock as Titan, who had been so calm and composed, suddenly took action, an action that left the entire room in awe. What followed was a series of movements that no one had ever seen from a dog in a place like this. A series of actions that would turn David's trial on its head and make everyone question what they thought they knew about loyalty, truth, and justice. Titan's reaction was swift. With a single, fluid motion, he moved out of the way and made his way to the front of the courtroom. The silence that followed was deafening. The jury stared at Titan as he trotted towards the witness stand, his movements precise, deliberate, and yet full of purpose. David's heart pounded in his chest as he watched Titan move. He had never given this signal in such a public setting before, but he knew Titan would understand what was at stake. His breath caught as the dog stopped just short of the prosecutor, his eyes never leaving the man who had questioned David's integrity for hours. For a moment, it seemed like Titan was simply surveying the room, taking in the faces of everyone present, each person frozen in disbelief at the sheer audacity of the German Shepherd's actions. But then Titan did something even more unthinkable. He turned, lifted his paw, and gently tapped on the floor in a rhythmic pattern, one that echoed with eerie precision. The judge, stunned by the spectacle, hesitated. "What is he doing?" the judge asked, eyes wide, his voice low, as if unsure whether he had just witnessed some form of divine intervention. Titan's tapping continued for several moments, but now there was a shift. As if on cue, the courtroom buzzed with confusion, whispers rising from every corner. "What does it mean?" someone murmured. "Is he trying to tell us something?" David's heart raced. The signal he had given Titan was meant to communicate the truth. This was no random action. This was the dog trying to show the world what had happened on that battlefield. The tapping, David knew, was a message, a final plea for clarity in a world filled with uncertainty. The prosecutor, his face pale and visibly unnerved, tried to regain his composure. "This is preposterous," he spat. "This animal cannot testify. This is ridiculous." But the judge, who had been silent, watching with increasing unease, finally stood, his gavel raised, and silenced the courtroom. "Mr. McAllister," the judge's voice broke the tension. "You will explain to this court what this behavior means. Is this some kind of stunt?" David took a deep breath. This was it. The moment he had dreaded but knew he couldn't avoid. He locked eyes with Titan, who was still standing resolute in the center of the courtroom. "Titan," David said, his voice steady but strained, "is trying to tell you the truth. He's been with me every step of the way in war and at home. He knows the truth of what happened on that day." The judge, skeptical but curious, motioned for the room to quiet. "Explain yourself, Mr. McAllister." David's heart pounded in his chest, but he continued. "Titan is a trained service dog, yes. But he's also my partner. He was there with me when the explosion happened. He knows exactly what happened, and if you pay attention to his actions you will see it. You'll see the truth." David's words hung in the air, and for the first time since the trial began, there was a flicker of doubt in the air. Had they all been wrong? Had they misjudged him? The room stood still as Titan made one final, breathtaking move. With the eyes of every juror, every lawyer, and every spectator trained on him, the dog did something that shattered the boundaries of belief. It was the final moment of reckoning, and in that moment, a buried truth, one that had been shrouded in the dust of war, rose to the surface, changing everything forever. David's eyes never left Titan. The tension in the room was thick, the anticipation building with every passing second. The tapping had stopped, but Titan's eyes remained fixed on the prosecutor. A quiet understanding passed between the two, as if they were in some silent battle of wills. David could see it now. The truth was within reach. He could feel the weight of it like a hand on his chest. The dog had been trained to be more than just a companion. Titan was a living witness, a silent observer with memories of moments that no human could ever fully comprehend. "Your Honor," David spoke again, his voice gaining strength, "Titan was with me during the incident in question. He's trained to respond to my commands, but more than that, he knows the environment, the people, and what transpired that day. He can give us the truth. But it's not in the way you expect. He has no words, but he has actions. You must pay attention to what he's trying to tell us." The prosecutor sneered, still not convinced. "This is absurd. We are talking about an animal, not a witness." David looked at Titan one last time. Then he gave the signal again, this time with a specific intention. Titan moved swiftly to the table, his paw tapping on the floor. But this time it was not a random tap. It was a sequence, a rhythm, deliberate and precise. The dog was signaling. The tapping was not just noise. It was an answer. The room fell silent, the weight of Titan's movement sinking in. David's lawyer leaned forward, his eyes widening. "It's Morse code," he whispered. "Titan is communicating in Morse code." Titan's paws had been tapping the floor in a clear and deliberate pattern. The room watched in awe as the message became clear, innocent. A gasp swept through the courtroom. The prosecutor's face drained of color. The judge's hand gripped the gavel tightly as if unsure of how to process what was happening. David felt a sense of relief wash over him as Titan's work was done. The truth, in the most unexpected form, had been revealed. The prosecutor stood frozen, unable to respond. The jury sat in stunned silence, looking from David to Titan, then back again. The room was no longer filled with doubt. It was filled with awe. Titan had done what words couldn't. He had communicated the truth that no one else could understand. David's gaze softened, filled with gratitude. He whispered to Titan, who sat proudly at his feet, his job complete. "You did it, buddy," David said softly. "You saved me." The judge, still reeling from the shock, took a deep breath. This is unprecedented," he murmured. "But I believe we have a duty to reconsider the evidence in light of this communication." The courtroom erupted into chaos, lawyers scrambling, the jury whispering frantically. But for David and Titan, the world had already shifted. The truth was out, and their bond, one forged in war and solidified in trust, had triumphed. In the end, David was exonerated. The courtroom's disbelief turned to awe, and Titan's loyalty would forever be etched into the annals of history. As they left the courtroom, David couldn't help but think that, in a world where the truth was often twisted and hidden, it was sometimes the simplest gestures, like the tap of a paw, that could break the silence and bring clarity. And as Titan walked beside him, David knew that no matter what happened next, they would always fight together. Always.